This meeting is being recorded.
Welcome, everybody, to Boston 9/11 Truth. Today we have a very special speaker, Barrie Zwicker, and we're just really honored that he's decided to join us. For those who got the email invite, I'm sure you checked out his YouTube channel. Tonight he's going to be talking about personal to political false flag ops, including 9/11. Barrie hails from Vancouver. Just trying to go through his uh, bio quickly and admit people in the interim. So I'm going to skip down his early days. Uh, so he's used his independence, freedom of mind, and time to become more knowledgeable about the large and deep establishment of the American empire, all of which prepared him to become the very first to see before noon on the day of 9/11, that the events of the day comprised a brazen inside job, a false flag terror fraud that launched the so-called war on terror. Because he has earned his spurs learning the craft of TV, been able to go on national TV on his own program, but seriously questioned official 9/11, becoming the first journalist in the world to do so. That was in a series of 7 commentaries beginning in January 2002. He launched a week-long international inquiry into 9/11 at the University of Toronto. Later, writing a 2006 book entitled Towers of Deception, the Media of 9/11. It became a bestseller in Canada, 16,000 copies sold, and earned gold in the current events category of the 2007 Independent Publishers Award. So let's get started. We're going to, I have to let people in, hold your horses to go in. Okay. We're going to do, usually we have people hold their questions to the end of his presentation. But Barrie has elected to allow questions beforehand. So if you have a question, stay on mute until you do have a question. I'm going to make sure everybody who's not speaking is on mute. Just raise your electronic hand. If you can't figure out how to raise your electronic hand, let me know in the chat. Or if you can't figure that out, just wave wildly at me. And remember to keep your questions respectful and on topic. And I'm not going to allow anybody to shout over each other or speak over each other. We're going to speak in turn. All right. And I'm going to limit questions to 2 minutes. Okay. So let me spotlight Barrie. Oh, and just a quick disclaimer, the views of our speakers do not necessarily reflect the views of Boston 9/11 Truth. Their views are during the presentation are their own. All right. Let's see, this is not working. There we go. There you go. You're spotlighted. Welcome, Barrie. I'm so delighted to have you join us. Yeah, it's good to see your big smiley face.
Well, you got everything right, Susan, except I don't hail from Vancouver. I'm just wearing a Vancouver 9/11
Oh,
Truth T-shirt. I put it on for change. And I should say, I've probably already said, and some people heard, that I'm using a laptop tonight, and I hardly even know how to use it. It's just new. It's used actually, but it's new to me. And I have made a lot of notes, and I might even read to them. I'm not a bad reader, and it might be faster and clearer if I actually do that. So don't be surprised if I do. So I really appreciate being invited to join this group, which is already quite wonderful. And I must say that the preparations I did over the last few days, um, they were learning experience for me because they blended with the fact that I'm writing my memoir. And anyone who's written a memoir knows that you really learn a lot about yourself. You look back and reinterpret even into childhood. And so I'm going to be sort of dipping into that as to answer the question, which is suggested by what you said in your introduction, Susan, that before noon on 9/11, I said, and I have witnesses, this is a Reichstag fire 2001. And of course, you're probably familiar with the Reichstag fire, but if not, it was a it was blamed on the communists, but it was planned and carried out by Hitler and Goering and Goebbels. And it was a major false flag operation, which led to the worst war we've ever had, led to the Hitler coming to power and starting World War II. So there's another false flag op that that I believe is a false flag op that I'd like to raise if there's time on the clock when we get to other things that are more 9/11 truthy, if we may call it that. Um, Now, there was something, and I'm now looking over my notes to see the part where I've introduced this. Um, and that is that last Tuesday, and this follows up on what the speaker 2 weeks ago said about how we need to continue to be reminded about 9/11. That is the official narrative of 9/11. And so I come back to just last Tuesday, 48 hours ago. There is a remarkable case, example of being reminded of the official story that pissed me off royally. Sorry for my language. I was watching TV Ontario, which is a marvelous current affairs show that I watch normally 5 nights a week. It's called The Agenda. It starts at 8. And TVO produces more than its share of documentaries, too. So at 9, when the agenda was over, I turned to watch the fifth of a 6-part series of documentaries they've been showing called Truth and Lies. And these are about deceptions in history. And I'd watched an earlier one about Hitler. It was very worthwhile. This one was about the use of lies by religions. Yes, religions. The politics of religion. Very promising. But how did it begin? It began by accepting the official narrative of 9/11. Hook, line, and sinker, explicitly accepting that Muslim terrorists led by OBL did 9/11. So, in other words, this documentary about lying began by endorsing and promoting one of the biggest lies in history, the official narrative of 9/11. So I confess that I did then what I almost never do. In a fit of anger and using language I won't repeat, I turned it off there and then, couldn't stomach it. But I may watch it later because I can get it on the TVO website. But it bears out what I said in the snowshoe film, the little short 10-minute one. And I'm wondering, I can't see all of you because of the way that things are set up, but how many watched that snowshoe uh, film and put up your hand, I guess, even though I can't see all the hands? If you can see them all, Susan, how many hands went up?
Oh, a lot of people don't have their picture up. So maybe if you go to React, um,
Can I just ask, what's the snowshoe
It's
program?
it's a Canadian documentary film organization,
Okay.
Snowshoe Films. Yeah. Anyway, it is not that, but what I said at the end of that, and it's worth it. The 10 minutes is worth it, I think, because what happened to me 48 hours ago really prove that what I said at the end of that snowshoe interview, uh, that the phrase, the terrorist attacks of September 11th, 2001, that phrase has been published not millions, but trillions of times since. And I made that point at the end of that film. Anyway, I'm going to more deal with false flag ops than about 9/11 in particular. And it's not that we don't have more to learn about, yeah, there's snowshoe films showing up. It's not that everybody doesn't have more to learn about 9/11. And John, 2 weeks ago, mentioned about Earth being brought to the grounds of the Pentagon. I didn't know that. Always stuff to learn. But I'll go back to what Susan usually asks guests, which is, how did you get interested in 9/11 at first? And that's where things kind of blend with the memoir that I'm writing. And and that enabled me in turn to say before noon on 9/11, I had witnesses, my wife and our tenants from our basement apartment. I said, this is Reichstag fire 9/11. So the factors that I think in retrospect enabled me to be prepared to come to that conclusion. And you know, there's a saying that uh, fortune favors the prepared mind. And that's actually not entirely true, because if your mind is prepared, it can just lead you into an uphill battle, not necessarily fortune. But anyway, uh, I did learn, or rather, one factor is my age, and so I was 67 in 2001, a member of the silent generation, although really being silent has never been my thing. And I remember a student I had one time when I taught university at Ryerson, taught journalism, and she burst into the room and she said, demographics explain everything. And she was only 90% right. I mean, the generation you're in shows what you've been exposed to. I was exposed, especially through my father, uh, to the Reichstag fire, and that he thought it was a false flag op, although that term wasn't used in those days. It was a deception. I mean, Hitler was behind it. And so I then read this book by William L. Shirer, The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. And he explains in around page 193 about how it happened, that Goebbels had the first thought about it, and Rudolf Diels, the Gestapo chief, added in an affidavit, and this was at the Nuremberg trials, Göring knew exactly how the fire was to be started and had ordered it to be prepared. And so the also partly true in this story about the Reichstag fire is that the Göring and the others proclaimed that it was a crime and a communist crime. And I'm reading from Shire here. They proclaimed at once upon the arrival at the fire, Göring, sweating and puffing and quite beside himself with excitement, was already there ahead of them, declaiming to heaven, as Papen was the president at the time, later recalled, "This is a communist crime against the new government." To the new Gestapo chief, Rudolf Diels, Göring shouted, "This is the beginning of the communist revolution. We must not wait a minute. We will show no mercy. Every communist official must be shot where he is found. Every communist deputy must this very night be strung up." So this is the kind of power that a deception has. It can allow people to say things like that and then carry out actions accordingly. So this was, I mean, this enabled the Nazis to come to power, and Hitler, what didn't entirely come to power legally, came close. And so it enabled the Nazis to launch World War II, which took between 70 and 85 million lives, making it the deadliest in human history. And that includes both military and civilian casualties, with a significant portion of civilian deaths occurring in the Soviet Union that lost 27 million lives, a fact I believe most Americans or few Americans know. So I was familiar with the concept of false flag ops. Now, my memoir is divided into two. Part one is first 67 years of my life from birth to November 5th. And then the second part is from 2001 to today, whatever today is, whatever will be the deadline for me turning in the manuscript. And by the way, being born November 5th, some of you may know that that's called Gunpowder Day or Guy Fawkes Day. And the Guy Fawkes was was an Englishman who was Catholic and was working for Catholic rights in England, where Catholics were being badly discriminated against. And what happened is that on November the 5th of 1605, the king's agents found in a basement 36 barrels of gunpowder. That's a basement of the Parliament buildings. And the king and queen were going to be in the Parliament the next day for the opening of Parliament. And the idea was that Guy Fawkes, who was allegedly caught with a long fuse, they called it a slow fuse, and matches and everything, was going to blow up the Parliament buildings. And so he was caught by the king's soldiers, and there was a very short trial, and he was drawn and quartered and quartered and killed. And it was like 9/11 in 1605. It was like 9/11. It was iconic. And in those days, the pulpits of the Church of England were like the media. And all the and the next Sunday, it was on a Tuesday, I think, and the next Sunday, from all the pulpits of the Church of England, all the preachers said that that Guy Fawkes was like the devil, and the king was like Jesus, and this was the official story of Guy Fawkes Day, or and until 1959 in England, it was against the law not to celebrate Guy Fawkes Day. That's how long a false flag operation can have its influence. So,
We actually have a question already for you.
yes, so go ahead.
Henry McLean, you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yep.
You're muted. You have to unmute yourself. There you
I'm
go.
sorry, that went up accidentally, Susan. I apologize.
Oh, you didn't have a question.
No, I didn't. Thank you. Sorry about that.
All right.
Okay, mistakes happen. That's okay. So, so my father was more political than religious, actually. He was a clergyman of the United Church of Canada. The United Church of Canada was formed in 1925 by the merger of three denominations, the Methodists and the Presbyterians and the Congregationalists. And so he was an ecumenist before that word practically was used. And so now, there's another book that I'd like to introduce, because this, again, is associated with false flag ops. And this is a book, Luce and His Empire by W.A. Swanberg. And he tells a story about how Time magazine, Henry and Claire Booth Luce they weren't called fascists, but they were so close to being fascists, it wasn't even funny. And they really liked Hitler. So when they're naming the man of the year for 1938,
Hmm.
they said it's going to be Hitler. And they had a very nice picture of him. as Swanberg says, he was like a banker in khaki, you know. And that was the artwork that they were going to use on the Time Man of the Year to be published on January the 2nd, 1939. Actually, it was January the 1st, 1930. No, January the 2nd, 1939. But the managing editor of Time magazine at that time was named Ralph Ingersoll. And he was not right wing the way the Luces were. They're actually on a boat coming back from England. And he overrode the artwork they wanted for Hitler, which made him look like a real hero. And Ingersoll found artwork that was quite different, and it was a uh, by an artist from Austria who had suffered under the Nazis, and uh, and this art that they finally used showed Hitler as being at a huge organ, which had all sorts of weapons and everything coming out of it, and it was an organ of destruction. So 142 days later, Hitler launched World War II. Can you imagine how it would have gone for Luce and Time magazine if he'd had his way and painted Hitler as a hero? Uh, so their managing editor saved the Luce's ass by having the Hitler cover that they actually ran. So that it all is part of why I had a prepared mind and became a media critic, which I'd done since the late 70s. Um, so another factor that I think led to me having a prepared mind, and each of you will have a story about how you got involved with 9/11 truth, and your story will be unique to you. And I'd just love to hear every one of them because it's interesting how people caught on. When did they think it was fishy and why? So another factor with me was aviation. And so my interest in aviation actually started when I was just 3.5 years old. And it was remarkable because the Hindenburg, that wonderful dirigible, the German dirigible, when it flew from Germany to its landing spot in New Jersey, it passed over Port Hood, where I lived as a child. And this picture is very much just exactly as if I'd taken a picture when I was 3.5 years old. Um, and it flew at about 175 feet of altitude, and sometimes even lower. So I remember the thrumming of the engines as the Hindenburg went over Port Hood. And there was a radio program just a few months ago on CBC Halifax, and they interviewed people like my age, and they remembered the Hindenburg from when they were 3 and 4 and 5 years old. It just really, it was a gigantic thing, as you may know. Here's the a picture of the Hindenburg, and see the people down below. It shows you the scale of that airship. And when that went over, you know, it was something. And so that got me interested in aviation. So from Port Hood, we moved to Upper Canard in the Annapolis Valley. Now, of course, World War II is on now. And I would ride my little green tricycle to the high edge of the highway and watch the military convoys of army trucks going by. And nearby was the Royal Canadian Air Force Base at Greenwood. And so I would see the Hudson bombers. I would see the Lysanders, a high-winged monoplane, made a heck of a racket. The Lysander, the Mosquito bomber, which was the fastest aircraft in World War II, and its unique sound, it's sort of very fast, all made of plywood in Canada. And so these were and the Harvard trainers, the yellow Harvard trainers. And then we moved to Bridgetown, still in Nova Scotia, and the Catalina flying boats came at treetop level. And my parents put up an English training pilot. He was training at Greenwood, and he had room and board at our house. And he told how they would come back sometimes with twigs in the engine nacelles. They flew so low. And then we moved to Swan River, Manitoba, and I joined the Royal Canadian Air Cadets right away. And I got to be a flight sergeant. And in the summers, they had a camp at Gimli, the air base at Gimli, and I got to fly a twin Beech. So I was so interested in aviation. And by the way, my wife, who became my wife, when she was a stewardess with TransCanada Airlines, as it was called at that time, called Air Canada now. And I would pay to go on flights that she took just to be on the plane and with her. She'd fly Toronto, New York and return, Toronto and Windsor and return. So, and just last summer, my son bought me a 40-minute flight in a Tiger Moth at north of Toronto. So my interest in aviation has been constant. So on the morning of 9/11, when these US Air Force fighters were supposed to show up for this tremendous catastrophe that was happening. And I was jumping up and saying, come on, US Air Force. Jeannie said, calm down. No, I said, where are they? And then the penny dropped. Oh yeah, it's a stand down. That's part of the deal. It's a stand down. And now we knew later that the planes were at Otis were set out to do lazy figure eights over the Atlantic, while ostensibly New York was being attacked by Muslim terrorists. So then John O'Malley 2 weeks ago reminded us of something relevant to 9/11 truthers, which is spies and spying. And quite a long time ago, I can't remember the year, I was in Boston and I found that there was some bad cess between the people in the peace movement and people in the 9/11 truth movement. And the people in the 9/11 truth movement were just very skeptical about the official story. And these people in the peace movement, they didn't like that at all. Well, I was familiar with the fact that the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, called the Mounties in Canada, had infiltrated the peace movement because my father was a member of the peace movement. He was a really good New Testament Christian, and Christ was the Prince of Peace. And so that was a part of his theology and part of his politics. And so at an early age, I learned something about agents of the state because the Mounties, a Mountie came one day to our home, the United Church Manse, to speak with my dad and complain about him somehow, to report that some member of the congregation was saying my dad was communist. And my dad, I remember this, I was with him, he just said to the Mountie, go away. And the Mountie went. But later on, that was in Swan River. Later on, my dad, because in the United Church, the ministers change about every 5 years. That's a tradition. There's a book published each year about all the ministers looking for a new church and all the churches looking for a new minister. And they have something called preaching for a call. So a church would reach out to a minister listed in this book and say, would you like to come preach a sermon and we'll check you out. And we're going to check out a couple of others and then we'll make a choice about our new minister. So I was with my dad. I drove him from Swan River to Russell, where he had been invited to preach for a call. I was only 16. I was driving illegally our maroon 1946 Plymouth. And so he preached. And then the chairman of the board of stewards of that church, I didn't hear this personally, my dad told me, who was the richest man, a merchant in town and the richest man in town and chairman of the board of the Russell United Church, said to my dad, we're with you in your trouble. So my dad said, well, what trouble is that? And the chairman said, well, you must know that the Mounties came around and told us we shouldn't choose you because you're a bad communist. But we're with you. And they were. Dad got the call. But this is the kind of thing that agents of the state do. They try to hurt people in every way they can think of. And that includes people in the peace movement and people in the 9/11 truth movement. So I learned that the agents of the state could harass law-abiding citizens, even the clergy, for their political beliefs. And the way things are going in the States today, from what we understand, it's moving pretty quickly in the wrong direction. So another thing was that, I should mention, by the way, I got to get my materials out of order here a little bit about watching the Hindenburg, because its path of travel from Germany to New Jersey took it over Fort Hood. I might have actually watched the last trip
Wow.
before its horrible demise. And there's a picture of the Hindenburg when it exploded and broke into flames in New Jersey. This is a smaller picture of the same thing. And so that was the end of the dirigibles. That was the end of them. They're maybe coming back a little bit here and there. And then I'm going to skip some more stuff because I see it's 7:15 already.
Question in the chat. Stephen Andrews wants to know if you saw the interview with the C-130 pilot asked to trail the plane that hit the Pentagon. Are you familiar with that?
No, see, that's new to me.
Okay, I don't know if you want to address that, Stephen. You can unmute yourself and speak if you like.
Sure. Hi. Yes. In December of 2001, I was at a party with some old friends, and an eyewitness to the Pentagon thing told me what he witnessed, and he mentioned a C-130 pilot that I guess was asked by civilian FAA to trail the plane that hit the Pentagon. This was something I never heard about, but just a couple years ago, I found out that the C-130 pilot had done an interview for the 10th year anniversary. And since you're into aviation, I was just curious if you heard about that. I can maybe look up a link. I'll try to find it at some point, maybe next week or something. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Now, but it's interesting. You may not you may be wondering about my answer. I'm one of those 9/11 truthers, and to me, evidence is golden, and I think none of the evidence adds up to a transport type aircraft hitting the Pentagon. And one thin slice about that is that with Terry Meyssan in France was one that I first remember showing this. He had a photograph of a Boeing 767, and with its wingspan being huge, and the size of the hole in the Pentagon didn't match at all. And that's one thing. There are other facts and lacks of facts that militate against the claim that a plane hit the Pentagon. These planes, like the engines, weigh about 14 tons. Nobody ever saw two 14-ton engines being taken out of the Pentagon. It just falls apart altogether, the idea that a plane hit the Pentagon. Yes, there was a big explosion in the Pentagon. Yes. And there was that funny hole that got made. Yes. But that was part of the fakery. That's my opinion, but I think it's strongly backed by the evidence. And if you have other evidence that is contrary, we can be civil and disagree about it.
I also wanted to ask you, comment on the whole Nazi sympathies in the United States prior to World War II, prior to our getting into World War II. We had a lot of corporations that were sending, IBM doing trade with Germany, and their equipment was used in the concentration camps. There were parties given for Nazis. My mother, who was born in 1927, said she remembers her mother giving a party for Nazis. So there was a lot of sympathies for Nazis in the United States, and I suspect still are because of Operation Paperclip.
Well, you're hitting big nails right on the head. This book, Trading with the Enemy by Charles Hyam, he wrote two books about 2 years apart. The other one was American Swastika by Charles Hyam. Now, various corporations are mentioned. For instance, Standard Oil of New Jersey supplied oil to the German U-boats throughout World War II.
Wow, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And ITT provided most of the communications equipment for Hitler. There were Ford had a truck plant that produced trucks for the Nazis, which was located in France. That truck plant was never bombed. The cooperation of giant corporations with the Nazis was really widespread. And but do you know what? Charles Hyam was no lawsuit was ever launched against him because he had worked 21 years for the New York Times. He had his evidence so solid, and it came from Freedom of Information requests, which he made hundreds of. He had thousands of pages of evidence. And if Ford or GM or ITT had tried to sue him, they would lose and he would gain publicity with their loss. So those two books are really, really worth reading.
Well, I think first, when you look at who was George H.W. Bush's father,
There you go.
Prescott Bush, he
Yep.
tried to initiate a coup against FDR, and it took Smedley Butler, who pretended to be on the inside of the planning of this coup. He was a decorated World War I general who was now a senator at the time. And so they approached him thinking that he would be sympathetic. He pretended to be sympathetic and exposed them. And there was actually, a hearing in the Senate about it, but it was squashed because it was too darned embarrassing, I guess.
Yeah.
But they were fascist sympathizers as well.
Oh, yeah. There was Father Coughlin too on the radio. He was very pro-Nazi, and there was a lot, and partly that led to the isolationism of Americans when Hitler invaded Poland in September of 1939. America did not join the other allies. On 3 days later, France and England declared war on Germany. Within about a week, Canada declared war on Germany, but the United States did not declare war on Germany until 1941. So, Pearl Harbor was a kind of false flag operation. I think a lot of people know that. There's a great book about it called Day of Deception by Stinnett. And so the Roosevelt knew early on that this fleet had left Japan and was heading toward Pearl Harbor. The reason that they knew this was because the Americans had broken the Japanese codes, where these captains of these warships would talk, and they got kind of loose-lipped too, besides. And so they were knowing everything that these captains were saying, and where they were going and why. Now, MacArthur, he was kind of a loose cannon, and he wanted the world to know that. And they said to General MacArthur, "You shut your mouth. We don't want anyone to know that we know that this fleet is on the way to Pearl Harbor." And they took preparations. For instance, they took some warships in Pearl Harbor, American warships, that were really pretty recent and good. They removed them and they put old kind of clunky ships in their place and so on. Finally, the commander at Pearl Harbor found out that this Japanese fleet was coming. They immediately let him go and put in another commander who knew nothing about it. It had to be a surprise, and the Americans arranged, and bless their hearts, they arranged it would be a surprise. And so it was a huge iconic thing. And the day the day before Pearl Harbor, they'd had trouble enlisting soldiers to the U.S. Armed Forces. The day after Pearl Harbor, about 1 million volunteered to join. It was a fantastic thing, and it was a false flag operation in a sense. There are different types of false flag op, and this one I thought was morally justified.
Instead of make it happen on purpose, it was let it happen on purpose.
That is the thing. That's a brilliant thing. You either made it happen or you let it happen. And if you let it happen, you made it happen. And by the way, I think I'm looking at the clock, uh, that I'd like to, if it doesn't shock anybody, I would like to turn to October the 7th of 2023.
Before we do, we have one more question.
Oh, sure.
Magnus has his hand raised. Magnus, you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes, thank you for being here, Barrie Zwicker. I'm from Norway, actually. My question to you is, have you ever seen the demolition of the Reichstag building versus World Trade Center 2, the thermite demolition?
Well, I've seen footage of them both. Yeah,
Very similar.
very. I mean, there's something, I don't know how many people realize this, but it's a scientific fact, if you will, that all of those buildings came down in less time than it takes a telephone to ring twice.
Wow.
I didn't believe it. Somebody in an audience I was addressing said that, and I could hardly believe it myself. And I went back and I looked at Building 7 coming down, and I had a phone, and it didn't get to ring twice. So obviously, you can't destroy gigantic steel beams that fast.
That's true.
Yeah. Anyway, I'll turn, if I may, to October the 7th, because these horrible things are going on. I believe the word genocide is justified, of what Israel is doing to Gaza, and what's being done to the Palestinians on the West Bank. And it's against international law, it's immoral, and it's becoming grotesque. And so, was October the 7th actually a surprise attack? Or was it one of those that we just talked about that they let it happen? So I've got 8 points. And some of them are incontrovertible and some of them can be debated. First, there was a violent attack by Hamas that day, and the number of people killed now is known to be 1,195, which includes 379 members of the Israeli security forces. Second is that the attack would have taken at least months to plan. Third, Israel had full knowledge of that Hamas was preparing to attack. For instance, in the months preceding the attack, Hamas publicly released videos of its militants preparing to attack Israel. A video released in December 2022 showed Hamas training to take hostages, while another video showed Hamas practicing paragliding. And there's a whole lot of other evidence. The New York Times wrote that Israeli officials had obtained detailed attack plans more than a year before the attack. And so on. There's a lot of evidence along that line. But the fourth point is this: Israel's military presence in the area was way below normal on the day of the attack. Number 5, there's strong evidence of Israeli support for the creation of Hamas. For instance, Professor Avner Cohen, a former Israeli religious affairs official, publicly acknowledged that Hamas was, quote, an Israeli creation. On January the 19th of 2024, Reuters reported that Joseph Borrell, who's the EU foreign policy chief, he said while he was receiving an honorary directorate from a university that, quote, Israel had financed the creation of the Palestinian militant group Hamas, publicly contradicting Prime Minister Netanyahu, who has denied the allegations. Also, Yasser Arafat of the Palestinian Authority, in an interview with the Italian newspaper Corriere della Sera in December 2001, referred to Hamas as a creature of Israel. And it was the same with Shlomo Brom, a retired general and former deputy to Israel's national security advisor. He said he believes that an empowered Hamas helps Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu avoid negotiating over a Palestinian state. Sixth, there's strong evidence that after Israel's creation of Hamas, Israel provided large amounts of money to support Hamas. There's just tons of evidence that they arranged for millions of dollars to be given to Hamas. Actually, at a Likud party conference in 2019, Benjamin Netanyahu said, quote, anyone who wants to thwart the establishment of a Palestinian state has to support bolstering Hamas and transferring money to Hamas. This is part of our strategy to isolate the Palestinians in Gaza from the Palestinians in the West Bank. And on it goes. Seventh, the motive of the attack from the point of view of Israel is obvious to everyone in the grotesquely disproportionate genocidal response to October the 7th. Eighth, there's little to no evidence of Israel establishing a board of inquiry into the attack a year and 7 months after it happened. So my hypothesis, therefore, is, and we mentioned this 3 times already. Israel either made October 7th happen or they let it happen. And if they let it happen, they made it happen. That's a false flag operation. And I think it's more likely made than let when you consider that they created Hamas and then they financed it and supported it in every way. And then they knew entirely what it was up to. So that's almost the same as doing it.
Well, this is a 9/11 group.
Yeah.
So if you could tie, I think you may have seen Richard Gage's presentation, the parallels of 9/11 and October 7th. So if you could tie that into September 11th, that would be appreciated.
Well, I would be,
Do you think Israel had something to do with 9/11?
yeah, well, that's where you were going. And I don't have ironclad evidence about that. But I do think that it was fishy, to say the least, that those Israelis were on hand to applaud as they watched it happen. And then it was very strange how they eventually, disappeared back into Israel. So that was kind of a giveaway. But I think it was worse. I think that Larry Silverstein, who benefited immensely, didn't oppose it, to say the least, and he benefited from it. And he said some things that were odd about it. And I think I haven't really, as a 9/11 truther, put my focus on the Israeli connection, but I think that it's a connection. And well, actually, Netanyahu made a public statement saying that 9/11 was a good thing.
Yeah, it was good for Israel.
Yeah, it was good.
Well,
So, I mean, you can piece together an argument that at least they favored it, and which is a horrible thing to favor when a whole lot of people are slaughtered and a whole lot of real estate is destroyed, and that a war on terror is launched on the basis of it, and that millions of people die in that war on terror. So, anybody who agrees that 9/11 was a good thing has to be a pretty bad person.
um, so was there more that you wanted to present before we take more questions?
Oh, well, it's just one thing. It's a very quick thing. And again, there could be a hands up about how many, and I can't see everybody, so I'll have to get a report. But hands up, how many people know about Medias, MEDIAS touch?
See any hat?
Oh my gosh. Well, look, I want to say a word about it. Media's Touch is an independent media presence in California. And there are at least two brothers, I think three brothers involved. And their last name is Meiselas, Meiselas. And that's kind of where they get their name, Midas Touch Network. And they were in New York City just last weekend getting a prize at the Webbies as the podcast of the year. And they are the largest podcast in the United States and they are, as to the numbers of people who are linking in with Media's Touch.
Something happened to your microphone. You're very faint all of a sudden.
Oh my, isn't that something? Technical problem. Uh, they now outdraw uh, Fox News and all the other right-wing podcasts combined. Media's Touch. You should really check it out. I support it, because it's independent, and I think it's $45 a year. I think that's what I put out. And so when they won this Webby in New York, they were targeted uh, by Trumpers who tried to shut them down, and it's not the first time. And so, as Ben wrote just probably 24 hours ago, it also seems that during our live shows, trolls and harassers have picked up in a coordinated effort since the Webby win. A special thanks to our moderators for banning these accounts that try to interfere with the viewing experience. And they've also had death threats from Trump supporters.
If you look at your screen, is this the site?
You've got it.
Oh, okay.
Media's Touch. It's become the most viewed news channel on YouTube and the most downloaded podcast in America. And they issue daily reports and they interview people, including one of the reasons that it's the top podcast in Canada is because they've interviewed some Canadians, such as a former parliamentarian named Charlie Angus, marvelous member of the New Democratic Party. And he's just retired from Parliament after he was in Parliament for many sessions. And so they interview people who are progressive, and and they have they have podcast so much excavating the lies that Trump tells, excavating the nasty connections that he has, and so forth. And so finally, there's a media platform that is really big and strong to counterbalance Fox News and the others who have been telling lies in the opposite direction. Not that media has been telling lies, but that have been telling lies all along, and media reveals them over and over, day by day. It's really worthwhile. That's all I'd say. Just give it a look, and you'll learn a lot. I can't even keep up with the stuff that they produce. I maybe look once a day at something, and it's always good.
Well, should we open it up to questions?
Yeah, let's do.
All right. Go right ahead, everyone. Raise your hand if you've got a question or a comment. Hearing none. Al, go right ahead.
Yeah, Barry, as an independent journalist with so much history, I don't know if you have any recommendations for challenging the mainstream media. Recently, I came across a collage, which Jean Laratonda had shown us, of all these news stations saying the identical thing. It wasn't necessarily about 9/11, but I thought, brought home the point that, they're all reading from the same script. I mean, these newscasters are I mean, we all know they're borderline imbeciles, but I really wondered where you had so much experience challenging mainstream media, what your success rate, what you thought was the most important, how to go about it. And I think our battle, 90% of our battle right now is the media and how to counteract it. I don't know if you have any advice. I'm always trying to think of ways of, I mean, you talk to people that are newbies, unless they hear it on, one of the major TV stations, it doesn't exist. And whether you can give us any advice as to how to pursue um, some strategy, I guess. I don't know if I'm making.
Well, I think I catch the drift of your question. I say that because somehow the sound is a little broken up. Your voice was a little bit broken up, but I heard I got 90% of it. Yeah, we're talking media criticism, and I would just mention that I worked for weekly newspapers first, and then I worked for daily newspapers, including the Detroit News and the Flint Daily Journal and the Lansing State Journal, and the two largest newspapers in Canada, the Toronto Star and the Globe and Mail. And I was lucky in my my daily newspaper career, uh, because especially the Globe and Mail and then the Star, where at the Star I became the education editor. Had a bureau. They set up a bureau. They went really for education at one point. Set up a bureau, and they made me the chief of it. And I had three reporters working for me about education. That was great. But anyway, I started to see that the problems with the mainstream media that I was working in, and just one example, and I was looking at this partly from a political point of view, and my politics should be pretty evident just from what has been shared so far in this session. I'm left of center, that's for sure. And so I remember, and these certain anecdotes stick in your mind. When the Vietnam War was on, and there were these marches which I participated in to oppose the Vietnam War. And one time we were going down University Avenue, we being my wife and I and our two kids. We were in this march, thousands of people. And we're going down University Avenue, which is a very wide avenue, two lanes separated. And we passed the American consulate. And there is one of my fellow reporters from the Globe and Mail. He's up on the steps of the consulate having a nice chat with a military attache there, literally looking down on us protesters. And it showed, especially then, the Globe and Mail has improved since then, but it showed that the Globe was kind of an establishment newspaper. It leaned to the right, that's for sure. So anyway, I moved to the Star, and I couldn't claim really. I always realized the Star from its beginnings was much more liberal. It was established, I don't know, 100 years ago or whatever, by a printer. And he was a genius too, and he started this great newspaper in a day when there were about 12 newspapers in Toronto at that time, and the Star just rose up and became the very top one that was left leaning. There was the Globe, and then there was the Mail, and they joined, and they became, so they were the two main papers, leaning left, leaning right. So I was at the Globe, and I got a phone call one day. I'm not particularly proud of this in a way, but I got a phone call one day when I'm at my desk in the newsroom of the Globe and Mail. And the voice says, "This is Marty Goodman here." Well, Marty Goodman was the managing editor of the Star. And he said, "We'd like to have a chat with you. We're setting up this education bureau, you see." So I said, "Well, I guess probably I owe it to myself and my wife to at least have a chat." But I was quite loyal to the Globe and Mail, and I subscribe to it to this day, to the paper version and the Star. So I went to have a chat with them, and so one of the people at the chat was the city editor, Ray Timpson. And so Marty said, would you like to talk about salary? And I said, well, we should, because the Globe was known for being a little bit chintzy in paying. And Marty said, how be we double your salary that you're making at the Globe? I said, yeah, well, that would be okay. And Ray Timpson said, that's the new math. But I was more attuned to the politics of the Star. Now, there still is a lot of media criticism to be done about the New York Times and you know the St. Louis Post-Dispatch and the Washington Post and so on. And as a media critic, you know, you find out these weaknesses in the media. And these used to be called the elite media, with elite being a good word in those days. And so recently, for instance, because I don't do much media criticism anymore, I went into radio and did media criticism for the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation on 18 stations. I had a program called Facing the Fourth Estate. And then I joined Vision TV in 1989. And I was with them for 13 years as the only professional media critic on television, you know, like a permanent fixture for 13 years. And that's why I was able to produce this series about 9/11 when I was still with Vision TV, because they gave me free, I had earned a free hand there. But if you take, I can't stop being a media critic. So for instance, recently, the New York Times ran a 7,000 word obit about Pope Francis. And it never mentioned that Pope Francis had been in touch by phone regularly with a family in Gaza to be in touch with the humanity in Gaza. And the New York Times, well, I mean, how do you explain that? I don't know the answer to that, but that's the kind of thing that media criticism goes for. But I don't agree with any media critic, if that's what he or she wishes to call himself, who just says, well, all the media just lie. You know, like Trump. You can't engage in that kind of blanket criticism. It has to be based on evidence, such as I've just mentioned about the 7,000 word obit in the New York Times. You have to go and you have to find evidence. Evidence is golden. That everything has, not that evidence is all necessarily clear, but I mean, you can really dedicate yourself to finding out the facts before you launch a criticism that's media criticism. And that's all I ask people to do. Don't make generalities like you can't believe anything you read in the papers. That is destructive. That is just a generalized thing that it offers no value at all. So I myself, because I subscribe to the Saturday Globe and Mail and the Saturday Star and the Sunday Star. So the Sunday Star carries the New York Times weekend supplement in it. And I find a lot of value in that New York Times weekend supplement each Sunday. And I still think the Washington Post is quite good. I mean, Bezos put all that money into it, hiring new reporters, having new technology and everything. It's just sad that he folded, you know, uh, because because of Trump, really. But still, there's a terrific amount of excellent reporting in the Washington Post. I would recommend it. I would recommend the New York Times. I would recommend the LA Times. I recommend the Globe and Mail and the Star and the Vancouver Sun. You can pick paper, and they're doing a lot of great work, but they do have their blind spots. And of course, an ongoing blind spot in all of them is that none of them will look at 9/11. Not after it happened. They would refuse to investigate it, and they had investigative reporters or could have. And so that is an ongoing blind spot all these years in all the newspapers in the world. And it shows the power of an iconic propagandistic false flag op. You know, I think I mentioned earlier that I was born on Guy Fawkes Day and explained a little bit about what happened to Guy Fawkes and how it was a false flag op. Well, a book finally came out, actually by a priest, a Jesuit priest, um, which could have been titled "The Truth About Guy Fawkes Day," but it had a slightly lower octane title. His name was Gerard. It was 247 years after the event. So, you know, I don't have hopes that in my lifetime, especially my lifetime, but even if I was 5 years old and knew what I know now, I wouldn't expect in my lifetime that somehow there's going to be a breakthrough whereby the majority of people in the world will learn through crusading investigative journalism that 9/11 was a false flag op. But I'm all for continuing to work at it. You have to, it's the only thing you can do is strive to find the truth. And I'm an admirer of Bertrand Russell, the British philosopher, and he actually issued his 10 commandments. And the first commandment is never lie to yourself. And that includes denying things, sort of knowing and not knowing at the same time. Never lie to yourself. Never lie to others unless they are exercising tyranny. So if the Gestapo come in the middle of the night and ask where your daughter is, it's okay for you to tell them that she's in another country. You've got a moral right to lie sometimes. But I would just recommend also letters to the editor. The letters to the editor remain one of the best parts of any newspaper. The letters to the editor, and the letters to the editors are usually pretty good about publishing a good reflection, good cross section of what the readers have to say and contribute. So, in other words, and nowadays with the technology, you can be the media. You can have your own podcast and your own website, for that matter. And so, be the media is also kind of a touch word that you could go for. And just back, I'm reverting to another subject quickly, but it's related to the media. I think the most important book I've written, I've been involved in 3 books. I think the most important book I've written is Towers of Deception, the media cover-up of 9/11. So on my Wikipedia page, there's no mention of that book. Okay. And a friend of mine who looks into these things said that about 40 times somebody has removed the mention of towers of deception, and then somebody else puts it back, and then someone takes it out, and then someone puts it back. And that is agents of governments, CIA, psychological warfare division. They want to screw up my Wikipedia entry. And it leaves out that I launched international, there were 3 international 9/11 conferences, one in San Francisco, one in New York, and one in Toronto. And I launched the one in Toronto, and I put in $10,000 of my own to help bring it about. It was at the University of Toronto, went on for a week. There were 40 speakers from 3 continents. It's not in my Wikipedia entry. You know, you can't edit your own Wikipedia entry, you know that, eh?
And here we go. Wikipedia. Yeah.
I'm having trouble hearing who
You're breaking up, Sue. Yeah.
Yeah, Sue, your volume's down. Just looking for towers of deception. Yeah, it was in there. And then they take it out and they put it back.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Wow.
So the only reason we found this is because we're looking through the revision history. So you can see that they literally just keep taking it back out.
Yeah.
But it's not there right now.
That's right.
Busy little bees, aren't they? All right. So we have 4 more questions. And I just want to remind people to address what has been talked about tonight. Stay on topic and be civil, and keep your question to under 2 minutes.
Yeah, no swearing, Fran.
So first up, he raised his hand in the chat first. So that was Joe Olson. Go ahead, Joe.
Hi, kids. See if I can get my video to come on. Yeah, I've read 1,000 books on science and history, and I probably read 150 on World War II. I recommend a site called Tales of the American Empire. And just briefly, FDR started a war in the North Atlantic and had 4 attacks on U.S. destroyers by the Germans while we were illegally escorting British convoys as a neutral nation. Then after the Battle of then in January, between January and June of 1942, FDR refused to do blackouts along the East Coast to provide escorts or air cover for tankers, and they sunk 400 tankers and freighters along the East Coast, killing over 5,000 sailors, merchant marines. That was just to even up the score. Then, after Midway, Nimitz and MacArthur were invited to Washington, D.C. to do their 2 strategies for taking out the war in the Pacific. Nimitz said, we've sunk 4 of their aircraft carriers. All we got to do is move over and take Iwo Jima, Chichijima, Okinawa, and we can cut the supply line for Japan completely in half, and the war will be over in 6 months. And he goes, that's not a good idea. What about MacArthur? MacArthur said, well, we'll start off down in New Guinea, and we'll take every island all the way up, and we can make the war last for 4 years. Oh, that's a great idea. And then one of the episodes that's at Tales of American Empire is America bombed Japan after the nuclear bombings. And they had documented in the Chicago Tribune, which is where William Shire worked, but they had documented in the Tribune MacArthur's assistant that said Japan offered unconditional surrender 5 times prior to January of 1945 to FDR and MacArthur, and both of them were ignored. And the reason why is that they wanted to kill another 100,000 GIs, and they wanted to kill another 1,000,000 Japanese, and they wanted to be able to test the atomic bombs. So everything you know about World War II is absolute 100% crap. I've written 6 articles about it, done a number of interviews on it. But yes, I've also read the book on Pearl Harbor Betrayed. Unbelievable. Rape of Nanking. There was over 200,000 documented cases of cannibalism by the Japanese army, but they don't tell you about that. They don't tell you about the Unit 731 that had biological experiments that were worse than what Mengele in Nazi Germany.
You know, you're not, I have not encountered all of this. Some of it I have. But you're nailing things. The more I learn about history, the more I realize how much history I haven't been ever told. And especially if it's embarrassing to the power. And so good for you for digging into stuff and being energetic about spreading the information that you've got. And now you mentioned one book, and I was trying to take notes, but can you repeat the title of it?
Which one? Rape of Nanking?
No, it was earlier.
Book-wise, there's a book by William Bartlett on December 8th, MacArthur's Pearl Harbor, how he allowed half of the Pacific Air Fleet of B-17s and P-40s to be blown up on the ground by the Japanese without offering any resistance at all. And then I think it's just articles or it's chapters of Tales of the American Empire, but they've got 100.
I think that's what I'm recalling, Tales of the American Empire.
Right. It's a video series on YouTube, and they've got 30 episodes that cover everything in American history. Unbelievable stuff, but they've probably got 50 or 60 cover just World War II. And they go through all the stuff that you're talking about. Everything they could do to prolong the war, they did.
They made money on it. They just it's money making. You know, if the U.S. military magically just dissolved, the country would be thrown into a depression that would make the Great Depression look like a picnic. I mean, isn't it about 50% of tax dollars go to the military in your country?
Yeah.
Yep.
No, that's a terrible way to finance society. But anyway, we do need peace, and we've avoided talking about Trump, but what an enigma. I mean, he is not mentally well. There's that book, The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump, and it's 27 psychiatrists and psychologists. It's an anthology by them. There's now a second edition with 37. So, you know, he's a qualified narcissist of the first order. And yet that doesn't mean that he's useless. Now, he seems to have some kind of, he has to support, and he is supporting the military. He's increased the military budget in some areas beyond what the Pentagon has even asked. But he's going around the world talking about peace, and I don't get that. And if anybody could explain it, I'll listen.
Well, just one further comment. Yesterday, the U.S. House of Representatives, 177 Republicans, and every Republican senator except for Rand Paul sent a letter to the president demanding war with Iran.
Demanding war with Iran, eh? Yeah, what a great idea. Just what the world needs.
So next,
Mad world.
all right. You hear me?
Your sound is not good, but I heard you say, do you hear me?
Okay, next we have Jack Bottomley, who has a question. Go ahead, Jack.
Yes, a couple of things. First, I have inside knowledge about Pearl Harbor because I know some of the people. I knew they're dead now, and I think you and Joelson have some facts wrong. For example, the rape of Nanking is one of the reasons that we cut off the oil to Japan. But there's a lot. I won't get into it. But my concern is the media. I think people should be discouraged from listening to the media because most Americans are lazy news consumers. They watch a little bit and then they walk off when they think they know what's going on. And one example is the Gray Zone on YouTube, which is a great channel if you don't know it, a news channel, and the Katie Halper Show both had people watch 28 episodes of the Sunday news shows like Face the Nation, Meet the Press. And in 28 episodes, it was never mentioned that there's a famine in Gaza, that food is being blocked. And I keep being shocked. I meet intelligent people and I talk about that, and they don't know anything about it. They don't believe me that Israel would never, never cut off food to Gaza. Never. That Netanyahu was a wonderful man. And since the American consumer news consumer is so careless, that I think they should be discouraged from wasting their time sitting on the couch in front of the TV watching Fox or CBS or CBS, for example, and they're just being fed bullshit, which they believe. Oh, and the latest example is the two girls that were attacked in New York by a mob of young kids, and the young kids were shouting, "We're going to rape you with sticks," like the Palestinian raped the Jews that they're holding prisoner in Gaza, and it's exactly reversed. The Israelis raped. Yes.
Minutes. Can you wrap it up?
Yeah, I'll wrap it up. It's exactly reversed. The Israelis were raping the Palestinian prisoners with sticks, not the other way around. But half of America believes the wrong version of that story. So since they're so incompetent as news consumers, I think they need to be turned away from sitting on the couch and leaving the TV going all evening.
Well, I don't think that's practical. I mean, people are going to watch their TV, but what is practical is for people to become much more aware of the sources that they use, that they go to for their information. Now, I know that people break down into silos, right? So that's one of the reasons that there's this terrible polarity in society. It's creeping into Canada badly, as the results of our latest federal election showed. It was just nip and tuck; they're almost the same. And but if we pay closer attention to our sources, and share with our friends sources that we feel are on the level, then we're doing a good thing. I mean, I actually create a publication called Sources. I got it copyrighted, the title Sources, right? And it was distributed to the media in Canada. And so if I could share with you some of my trusted sources, for instance, Consortium News. And then when I find something like Consortium News or Chris Hedges, and there are others, there's about a dozen that I have found are constantly reliable. And I then support them. I send them $25 a month or whatever it is, because they now, with the shattered media landscape, newspapers dying left and right, we have no choice but to support media that we find are, sort of crude, telling the truth, unquote. There are truths. It's plural, should always be plural. But that's something that I recommend. And you've mentioned the gray zone shared there with the rest of us, including me, a YouTube series that I'm making a note of, and I'm going to check out. And that's how we can improve our sources, is by listening to people that we trust and they're honest and sincere, and they say you can buy that book or you can go to that television program or whatever it may be.
Thank you. Next we have Stephen Andrews.
Sue, can I say this? It's important. After I learned the truth about 9/11, I went to several people in the media that I know with videos like 9/11 mysteries, and I begged them, moaned, got them to promise to watch them, nagged them to watch them over like a year, really worked on them as well as I could. And they absolutely refused to watch that video, and they absolutely refused to ever become educated on that. So I feel very strongly that the media is lost. It's just, you have to go onto the internet and get away from it.
Yep. I also wanted to comment quickly that you checked in. I'm sorry, Jack, I have to mute your that's background noise. If you check in media sources at the crack of dawn, before the executive offices have opened up, like I find that when I check in on Reuters at 5 a.m., it's pretty much just the facts, unvarnished, no spin. By 8 a.m., the same story changes and takes a spin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's interesting. You've found that out.
Yeah. Yeah. And being an early riser, that's why I found that out. I do like to get up early. So anyway,
Early
Susan,
bird gets the worm.
Susan, when you lean forward, your sound gets very difficult to understand.
Yeah, when you're speaking right into your mic or whatever it is,
Yeah, if
you're clear. But if you turn away from it, you're muffled.
I noticed when you lean forward, it's very crackly.
Okay, I thought
Now that's where you are now sounds good.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead, Barrie.
I beg your pardon?
You were about to say something?
No.
All right. Next we have Steve Andrews has a question.
Yes, hi. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Great. First of all, thank you, Mr. Zwicker. That was a really interesting presentation. And thanks to Jean and Sandra and Susan. I've been doing these calls. I've done a couple in the last month. My background is just that I worked at the World Trade Center and like I witnessed the whole thing. And I've been kind of like reading about it for many years. And I just wanted to make a real quick comment. My dad was like worked for the Navy and was like a Pentagon bureaucrat. He worked at the Pentagon once every 2 or 3 weeks, I grew up, he taught me to read by reading the Washington Post. And all he did was say, oh, these guys are lying about this. These guys are lying about that. These guys are lying about that. So I also want to make a comment. I'm 50 years old and I'm looking around here and none of us are spring chickens. That's for sure. Right. No one believes in the New York Times or the Washington Post or any of that crap anymore. None of those people were serious journalists, and tying 9/11 to left-wing politics was and is a loser, just like tying Occupy Wall Street to left-wing politics, I think was a loser. This stuff about FDR, I consider him a villain of history, not a good guy. And I don't think progressives are good people, they're bad people. The people who attacked me for telling the truth about 9/11 to say were left-wing, liberal, Democrat progressives. And I'm sorry, I realize that's controversial. I'm not adding anything, but I just wanted to say it. Thank you. The Washington Post is not worth reading. I'd never pay a dime for that crap.
Well, you're generalizing there pretty heavily. Just to call a whole newspaper crap, it's not very helpful. I'm not being unfriendly toward you. I'm just being honest in my reaction. doesn't really lead anywhere useful. And I think that we should pay more attention to our language and try to make it more precise. And these nouns like garbage and crap, they don't eliminate at all. And so and if I'm trying to be reasonable and logical and using evidence, and you say that the WAPO, this is called WAPO, is crap, then I can just go to a site. I can go to the WAPO site and I can find an article that's well researched, that has a variety of sources and is well put together. And I can say, well, here is a specific article that's good. It sheds light. It's about an important subject. And I could cite one, for instance, that the Washington Post had a very good article a couple of weeks ago in which they went to states that had a lot of Trump supporters in them, farming states. And they interviewed them to find out what they think now about Trump. And a lot of these supporters of Trump say, we're not so happy with him now because he's hurting our livelihoods. He's hurting the chance that we can sell our crops, right? And there were like thousands of comments, and they now use AI to summarize the comments, and which is a good beneficial use of AI. There are others that aren't. And so the summary of the comments to the Washington Post article that says that all these Trump supporters now are falling away from supporting him as much as they did, and AI summed it up. That's the trend. And that's useful to know. Maybe it's farmers against Trump now. Let's see how the midterms go.
Next, we have Fran Shore. Go ahead, Fran.
Okay, thanks. Hey, Barrie.
Hi, Fran.
How are you?
Fine.
I just want to let everybody know that Barrie Zwicker was the first person we had speak in Colorado in 2004, and then we invited him back again in 2005. We had quite an adventure with Barrie. It was wonderful. We had lots of people attending those lectures that he gave, and that got us rolling. And also, thanks, Barrie, for about, when I was writing one of my essays, which spoke a lot about what happened during the Nazi regime, I got Barrie to vet it for me. And he recommended a book called Hitler's Willing Executioners.
Oh, yeah.
And that changed my whole essay. I realized I was coming to a wrong conclusion. And because of what I read in that book, Hitler's Willing Executioners, I had to change my whole essay. And that's because of Barrie. So thank you, Barrie.
Oh, yes, I've got that on my bookshelf now.
Yeah.
I've got quite a few books about Nazism and Hitler.
Yeah. And I want to mention on the media, thank you for recommending Media's Touch. I will check that out. And I want to say that I know, Susan, you mentioned in one of the sessions that you're very interested in tribalism and how that happens. And I am too. And I am really enjoying, I identify as a real progressive, left, liberal, progressive. However, I am now really enjoying finding my common ground with people who identify as conservative. And I really enjoy doing that And I find that if someone is willing to play the game and we can talk to each other in a civil manner, it's a wonderful kind of exchange that we can have. And I'm also looking at media and the political parties. And in a way, the political parties, they've kind of thrown up in the air and they're kind of upended. Not that they're exchanging one for the other, but it's very interesting that the Republicans are doing things that I would have expected the Democrats to do years ago, but they're not. It's very interesting for me to watch this. So one of the things as I continue with my writing, which I'm on my last essay now, I'm very busy, so it's hard for me to get to it, but I'm writing my last essay on the importance of awareness. And I'm going to bring up another topic that probably many of us do not know about that is really awful. And I won't tell you any more about it, but I'm very interested to get this out into the public. The other thing is that, Barrie, and for everyone, I have found as I'm doing my writing, I've found two platforms that I really enjoy, and that is called All Sides. That's all ALL Sides, SIDES. And what they do is they have charts about whether the media is left-leaning, right-leaning, right extreme, left extreme, whatever. And then they also give articles that that the left tend to report on, and then articles that the right tend to report on, and the blind spots of both. So I'm really enjoying that. And the other one I've just discovered more recently is called Ground News, GROUND News. And they're doing the same thing, only, and maybe it's a little different way they're doing it, but it's extremely interesting to see the blind spots of the left and the blind spots of the right. And I will say, even as a very progressive person, I just discovered an article recently that is on a far right website, and the left is not reporting on it at all. It's a big blind spot. And I see the article seems very well written. It seems very objective. They are reporting via evidence. And so here I am, left leaning, but I'm finding that this right wing, hard right wing platform is reporting on news that should be reported by the progressives, but they are not. They have a blind spot. So I think it's fascinating. And that's actually everything I want to say. So I want to thank you, Barrie. You got us started in Colorado, and I really want to thank you for that. And we had our adventure with Morgan Reynolds, if you may recall, in 2005. And we disinvited Morgan Reynolds because he was producing propaganda. He was producing unsubstantiated theories. And we are the first people in the country to disinvite him. And I want to thank you, Barrie, for that, for helping us make that decision. It was really a traumatic decision, but you were there and helping us get through that. So anyway, that's all I want to say is I'm enjoying giving up my tribalism. I'm enjoying it tremendously. And I'm enjoying throwing my tribalism up in the air and looking for evidence and looking how I can find common ground with everybody.
Well, you're sort of walking in the footsteps of Albert Einstein, who said, remember your humanity and forget the rest. And
Exactly.
Tribalism has been a terrible thing for so long. And also, I want to thank you about mentioning this all sides and also ground moves. I'm going to check those out.
Good, thank you.
Those are new to me, and they sound very promising. And they remind me of something that I haven't said this evening. which normally I would. But if the failings, let's say, of the media, and let's say the mainstream media, but the failings of the media include, of course, lying, but but competing for that very important failing is omission. You're talking about
Yes,
blind spots.
yes,
Omission is I think it's right up there with lying.
yeah.
And that's why I mentioned the New York Times 7,000 word obit on Francis, not mentioning that Francis personally was in touch with a suffering family in Gaza, showed his humanity, and it showed that he was in touch, and it was worth putting in the obit, but the New York Times didn't do it. So
Hmm.
the question is why? Because much of the world knew about that. It had been widely mentioned around the time of his death that he was doing this. He was in touch with this family. Really bad omission.
I found, as I studied propaganda, and one of my essays, Barry, was on how to recognize propaganda. And as I studied that, one of the techniques of propaganda, one of the main techniques is omission.
Oh.
Yeah. So you have to read widely. You have to read all sides, not both sides, but all sides. And you have to read widely and put together what seems via the evidence seems most likely to be the truth, and give up the tribalism.
I couldn't agree more, Fran. That's wonderful that you're following that path. You're saying those things, you're sharing them, and it's very, very helpful.
Thank you.
Well,
So good to see you again, Barry.
Same here.
Yeah.
we'll take one last question because my boss has told me he wants to wrap this up at 8. I don't think that's possible, but we'll come as close as we can. Hamuk has a question.
Yes. Thank you.
Barry, nice to see you. It's been a long, long time. You're one of my big heroes. You're right up there with David Ray Griffin. Not so much the religious side, but you had the videos ready to go when I needed them. It was amazing. Anyway, I wanted to mention a new book that I've just come across, Jim McGregor and John O'Dowd. And it's called Two World Wars and Hitler. And this guy, Jim McGregor, has written two previous books that are just incredible, Hidden History and Prolonging the Agony, about World War I. And now these two guys, with his new co-author, have connected World War I and World War II and show that Hitler was in fact he had a handler planted, Putzi something or other. I mean, get the book. It's the next thing you need to read. I would pass that on to the rest of the group here, that this is new data that must be looked at immediately.
Two world wars and Hitler. And that's Jim McGregor, is it?
Yeah, MacGreger. No capital G in the second part of it, just Mac Gregor.
Okay. And the other guy is
John O'Dowd, O''DOWD.
Okay, that's all I
It's
need.
right up your alley. And the other people, and Fran, I think you'd also find this quite interesting.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Helmix. Just I've been blessed here with things that people have mentioned that I'll follow up on. I've got too much to do, so
Yeah.
I'm divided in
Me
the
too.
but
What was was it a book you were recommending? Tell me again what
Yes,
it was.
it's called Two World Wars and
Yeah.
Hitler, and it's by Jim McGregor
Okay.
and John O'Dowd, both doctors of philosophy, I believe. Anyway,
Okay.
this guy McGregor has been on this for 50 years, And his two earlier books are Deep History of World War I and Prolonging the Agony, tells you where they went to make money by making the war last 4 years longer. It's just
Thank you.
incredible piece of work. And then this one nails it by connecting World War I and World War II.
Boy,
It nails it. I've never seen anything like it. Anyway, you're going to love it.
that's gold. That's gold, Hummocks. Thanks so much.
You are welcome.
We're going to end the program, this portion of our program. We're going to stop the recording and move along to our local agenda, Boston 9/11 Truth agenda items. But thank you, Barrie, for joining us. We could go on for hours.
Now, if I don't hang around, will I be missing stuff that I should hang around for?
Well, you can be on the wall and make your decision. We're going to be talking about some national initiatives for 9/11 that Boston's going to be involved in, and then some stuff that probably wouldn't have any interest to you. But I'm gonna everybody's welcome to hang on. But at this point, I'm gonna end the recording. Thank you.
I'll hang around a bit,